Morphological analysis is a really useful tool for when you're doing creative thinking, but it can sound a bit scary. In this video, I want to explain what morphological is and how it can help you come up with some really interesting connections. Morphological analysis is made up of 3 steps. The first step is to break up the object into its key components. So you have to really think of it as a system and think about what are the main parts of it. When you've done that, the next step is to list a whole lot of different ideas that you might have for each component. And finally, you start looking for unusual combinations to spark new ideas. Now, that doesn't make much sense unless you actually look at it in practice, so we're going to do an example. In our example, we're going to come up with a new idea for a lamp. So our first step is to think about the lamp and the main components that we see in most lamps. So the first one, and probably the most important one, is a lamp has a light source. So that's the thing that makes a lamp useful. Most lamps also have a shade of some kind. Shades are really important when we think about lamps because they make the light gentler and diffuse it. And finally, a lot of lamps also have some kind of base. So something so that it's not sitting on the ground or on a desk. We then build a table with those 3 main components on them. So the base, the shade, and the light source. We then start brainstorming the different items that could be used, for example, the base. So when we think of a base, it could be a base for a lamp that's made out of wood. Maybe we could have a marble base. Then we could start getting a bit crazy, and this idea came from one of my students. They suggested, why couldn't you use a person as the base? Which sounds very strange, but that's where the creativity starts coming in. Or what about if we use a microphone stand as our base? Shade. So the average lamp will have a shade made out of cotton. Maybe we could use paper. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with paper and origami. Wood could be a really interesting shade, particularly using laser cutting techniques. Or what about an umbrella? Now, light source, that's when sometimes people can get the most creative. So we started off going, what about if we use a light bulb, a torch, LEDs? I like LEDs because you can change both the color temperature, or even, for example, you could use it to make it go lighter or darker. So there's a lot of things you can do with LEDs. You could use fire or flames, or even something crazy like glowworms. Once you've come up with your list of different ideas, your next step is to look for some unusual associations or unusual combinations. So let's have a look at that idea of using a person as the base. Now, if I have a person at the base, what I might want to do is come up with something that's a little bit more mainstream for the shade to really contrast and create a juxtapositioning. So I'm going to say a cotton shade might work well there. And as a light source, I'm going to go with LEDs so that we can do some more interesting things with that. This unusual combination might spark an idea in you that's really unexpected and creative. Now, I don't know what creative thinking techniques these designers used, but here's 3 lamps that could have been created using morphological analysis. So the first one is this lamp by Philippe Starck, and it's a gun lamp, and you can turn it on using the trigger. This is a pendant light, and it's by a artist in Italy. And what they were doing is they were looking at a different material. So they found that there is a material used by the military to protect things like tanks, where you spray it and it creates this soft, almost, it hardens like a fabric. And they sprayed that around a frame in order to create a really soft and interesting shaped lamp. This lamp was designed by Studio Job, and they were inspired by a crane, which I find really interesting because cranes can be moved to a whole lot of different positions. So that could be a really functional idea for a lamp. So let's revise what morphological analysis is. Morphological analysis requires you to break the object into its key components, List all the different ideas you have for each component, and then look for unusual combinations. I hope this helps you use morphological analysis, which is a really useful creative thinking tool.